I think, the way we run elections sometimes, I wish we don't have to have elections, but it's necessary. Fundamentally for me, I think is the uncertainties that we tend to create around the election period then affects everything from the capital market to investors' confidence to even growth and development. And there's a big emphasis on rule of law or lack of it. So the justice issue that we're having now, I think if you focus on what is really the issue, are there allegations? Are those allegations founded? Do they have any merit? In insane crimes, even an allegation. I was in Australia last year around November, and the former Prime Minister resigned just because they alleged that there was a sexual harassment. It hasn't even been established. So, and then on the part of the executive, if we focus on building institutions, you would ask actually and say, how did you go through the screening process if you had accounts with those kind of amount they are alleging that haven't been declared? Who screened and said it was okay? Now we're hearing that there's a list of people constituting the panel committee for election tribunal, and some of them already passed on. Who did the screening that you are now appointing dead people to sit on panel? So I think it's just the way we do things. We need to build strong institutions in Nigeria.
All right, very interesting. We'll keep following that story, and as it unfolds, and then there's an emergency meeting by the NJC today, and also the NB as well. I've also called.
Yeah, I think tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes, 29th. Yeah.
All right then. Moving on to on this executive order, I'd just like to get your thoughts, how, on this initiative and how you think it's going to play out.
Yes. So the government doesn't have money like in many countries. So what government is trying to do is to say, can we get the private sector to fund the construction, renovation, and maintenance of roads, and in return, they will get tax credits. So what this means is, whatever amount of money the private sector spends, they get the full amount plus a little uplift. Because, of course, it's going to take some years before you can recover the money you spend by way of tax credits. And that means there's time value of money. Imagine you borrowed at about 20-something% to build roads. Now, the main advantages that will come from this is the efficiency of the private sector. But it will depend on how we implement this. On one hand, you know that with private sector, you're not going to have abandoned projects, hopefully. You also hope that they spend less and get better quality, because the issue of underhand dealing, bribe will be a lot less. But if you don't implement it very well, or you don't think about a robust transparency initiative around it, you're just going to transfer the inefficiency of the public sector to the private sector. But I think overall it's a good initiative.
Okay, but do you think the incentive given is enough on tax credits? And also, do you think there should also be a way of checking the standards of the projects that they are executing?
Yes, indeed. I think part of there's going to be a committee that will be set up, and they're going to be looking at standards. Now, is there sufficient incentive? I'll say yes and no. The incentive is not so much about the tax credit, because if I spend 1,000 naira and you give me a credit of 1,000 naira, you have not done me any favor. If you give me an uplift of 10%, I'll say to you, actually, I can put my 1,000 into even treasury bills and government bond and make more than 10%. So to that extent, there's no incentive. But here is where the incentive is. There are loads of companies who struggle with their own operations and transportation and logistics because the roads are bad. See when Zenith Bank fixed the Ajosa Adeogun Road a few years back. I think they spent over ₦1 billion. They have their head office there. They have 2 other branches there. So you have many companies like that who would love to even develop the infrastructure because it will facilitate their own businesses. So that is the incentive for them. At the end of the day, if this works well, there should be a ripple effect on the economy, that the manufacturing sector should get better, more logistics, more businesses, and hopefully government then makes more money from people making more profit from their businesses.
But if you're going to estimate, how much do you think this will, move our drive to kind of plug the deficit in our infrastructure?
I doubt it. Nigeria has about 32,000 kilometers of federal road alone. The entire road network for Nigeria is over 190,000 kilometers. Now, this initiative covers only federal government roads. I tend to have my issues with that in principle because the tax credit you're giving them, if it was paid into federation account, it will be shared by all levels of government. Now, you're saying private sector can spend the money, get the credit, but only federal roads. But having said that, it's not going to make any significant impact in my view. But whatever little impact we make will be better than nothing. So it's a baby step.
All right, then I just want to get your thoughts on first the government's revenue drive so far, and also some of the initiatives that have come out of the government as well. We saw the recent one around VAT as well.
Yeah, again, this is one thing that I think will not move the needle because the revenue that Nigeria makes historically, and this is similar in other countries, more than 95% of it comes from about 4 or 5 taxes. But then every time we're thinking about new taxes, when you say VAT on luxury item and the rest of it, how much you do raise from that? The major issue is to make sure that we expand the tax net and expand the tax base. Now, the compliance rate with VAT in Nigeria is less than 20%. Majority of people who should be paying the 5% are not even paying. Look at personal income tax. Look at company income tax. All the taxes you have, and in most cases, take personal income tax for example, is the bottom that is paying. The top are not paying. In the US, the top 1% pays more than the bottom 90%. In South Africa, the top 1% pays more than the bottom 99%. Until you get the top 1% of society to pay the right amount of tax, we will not move this tax to GDP ratio. It doesn't matter whether you introduce taxes on luxury products or you increase the VAT, you still will not get the right answers.
Okay, but when you look at the revenue generation, especially from the FIRS, I saw the figures put out just a while back talking about they raised about 5.3 trillion last year, which was the highest in a while, and then they're targeting about 8 trillion for 2019. How feasible do you think this is?
You know, 5.3 trillion was a record in nominal terms. If you convert that to dollar equivalent, you see that we made even more than 5 trillion when dollar was 160 many years ago. I commend the FRS because it's difficult to even make the little that they did. Is 8 trillion feasible? Yes. In fact, we shouldn't be talking about 8 trillion in Nigeria as of today. We should be talking about 20 to 25 trillion. So 8 trillion is feasible, but you have to reform the tax system. You cannot, within the existing legal framework, administrative framework, and policy framework, attain 8 trillion naira in tax revenue. You need fundamental reforms.